around the 30th anniversary of the Beijing Platform, a Declaration and Platform for Action. So thank you so much for being here this morning. My name is Beatrice Maillet. I'm the Minister, Counselor, and Legal Advisor at the Canadian Mission to the United Nations. And it's really a pleasure and an honor for me to be here with the event organized by the EPIC Secretariat, and I really want to take a moment to thank them for getting us again this year together on this important topic. First, I also want to express my thanks to the panelists. Unfortunately, I may have to escape before the end, so I should be able to say on behalf of all of you, thank you to our amazing panel and their engagement on this issue of advancing equal pay and gender equality in the world of work. So we have two panels today. First, we will have a panel moderated by Monica Kaiser, the head of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD Social Policy Division. And second, a panel monitored or moderated by Emanuela Pozan, the Senior Gender Equality and Non-Discrimination Specialist at the International Labor Organization. A few housekeeping items. This is a hybrid event, so welcome to all of you online. This will be an event only in English. There are unfortunately no translation, mais c'est toujours un plaisir, bien entendu, comme Canadienne, de vous souhaiter la bienvenue en français. We will ask our panelists to be prompt because we have to close the event at 9:45 to enable all of you to take advantage of the rest of the events around the Commission. EPIC, as you know, was founded in 2017 by UN Women, the ILO, and the OECD, and is a multi-stakeholders forum whose main goal is to achieve equal pay for work of equal value for everyone, everywhere. Canada has been a strong advocate for EPIC's mission, serving as chair of the steering committee until the end of last year. And this year, we're very pleased to see Brazil assuming the role of chair as we stand as vice chair to support them. As we mark the 30th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, we should really reflect on the progress made in advancing gender equality and women's economic empowerment while recognizing the challenges that remain ahead. And I was very pleased actually to see in the political declaration that was adopted by consensus earlier this week, a strong paragraph on labor as we look forward to continue our journey together. Gender equality is not only a fundamental human right, but also a critical driver of sustainable development and economic growth. I don't think I have to convince this audience, but despite significant achievements, the principle of equal pay for work of equal value enshrined in SDG Target 8.5 has yet to be fully realized. Women continue to face systemic barriers to economic independence throughout their lives. Gender disparities begin early, influence educational and career opportunities. Women are overrepresented in lower paying sector and underrepresented in leadership. As I was talking in the coffee area earlier this morning, as we can still see in the high ranks of the United Nations, and we look forward to a Women's Secretary General soon, the unequal distribution of unpaid care work limits workforce participation in leading to lower poverty in old age. Canada also remained very committed to achieve SDG Target 8.5, and I'm pleased to share that modernizing the Employment Equity Act to better support women and underrepresented groups in federal regulated workplace was a success. The launch of EquiVision in 2024, a tool promoting pay equity, transparency, and workforce representation. Data is an helpful tool, advancing the Pay Equity Act to ensure equal pay for work of equal value and enforcing protections against workplace harassment and violence, which is too much prevalent in the workplace, including gender-based violence and harassment. So this side event will explore ways to strengthen equal opportunity through the life cycle, address occupational segregation, promote pay equity, and reinforce global commitments through policy and collaboration. I really encourage all of you to use this opportunity to exchange insight, good practices, and strengthen our collective commitment to gender equality and economic empowerment. This is the moment where it's my great pleasure to give the floor to Monica, who will lead our first panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Beatrice. And from me at the OECD, also great thank you for, first of all, to the Rockefeller Foundation for hosting us here today in this wonderful venue. It's really very, very nice to be here, and thank you so much for making it possible. Then a big thanks to all of you for being here this morning and sharing this discussion about EPIC. Let me just say one word about EPIC before we get started. It was actually founded around CSW. I think it was 2017 when we first started having the conversations. We thought, together with ILO and UN Women, we said we really need to do something about gender pay gaps. They're so stubborn. Even in the best performing OECD countries, which are no surprise, usually the Nordics, but they're not going away, they're stubborn, so we need to do something about it. And now, so many years later, we have a great dynamic, we have wonderful meetings, and I think what's really good about EPIC, and I would really invite you to look at the website and all the resources we have, it's very practical. It's not just talk that we need to close the gender gaps. It is actually about policy instruments, what countries are doing, what they're using in order to close these gaps, what works, what doesn't work. You'll find plenty of resources, and you can contact the people in the different countries using this, and all of us together, the OECD, the ILO, and UN Women are there to support your efforts in working on this. And take a look also if it's possible for you to join EPIC. We always want more members, and if you're interested, do take a look and come and join us in this effort. Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce the panelists for the first panel, which is a very important one. It is about skilling, upskilling, education of women, because we know we're living in a vastly, rapidly changing world. And we've been talking about skills and upskilling and training for many years. But now it's getting faster and faster and faster. I mean, all of you thinking about what your children and grandchildren will be doing, no idea, right? I mean, what do you even tell a young person nowadays what they're supposed to study in order to have a job and be certain that they will find employment? So to kick us off with a few remarks on this, I would like to first welcome my colleague Marta Encinas Martin from the OECD. Marta shares her time between our Education Directorate and our Global Relations, so the Outreach Directorate. So she will kick us off, and then we will have a discussion, and I will introduce the other panelists.
Thank you very much, Monica, and thank you to the Rockefeller Foundation for hosting us and to all of you for being here. So I'm going to show you 4 slides, and these 4 slides are going to show what women are doing at the OECD countries and beyond, because we have 2 surveys at the OECD. One is PISA. We evaluate the 15 years old in over 80 countries and compare the results in 3 skills or 3 domains: mathematics, science, and reading. And we have another one called PIAC, which we evaluate the skills formation of the youth and adult population. So we measure their skills from 16 to 65 years old, which is kind of a picture of 50 years of a country and what has happened. And then we'll see what happened with women. So here we see the educational choices women make. These are 20 years. We look at the 2000 and 2020. And these are the early graduates from tertiary education by field of study. So we can see on the left side that it's almost up to 80% of women choose education and health and welfare studies, right? Which means that very few men choose those fields of study. And on the right side, we see engineering and we see ICTs, which is technology. These are the jobs that are highly remunerated, where there is a lot of employment, and we see very few women choosing that. On the dark color, dark blue, we see the year 2000. On the turquoise, we say the 20s. And even on the right side, on ICTs, we see the less women are choosing this field of study, like computer science, etc. So, and this is the early graduate from the 2000s and 2020. Also in PISA, we asked the 15 years old, what do you want to be when you'll be 30? And in the last survey, we found out that more or less their wishes match where we have the recent graduates. If we look at the population in PIAC 1665, this is also the picture we have. So this picture is not very much changing. I mean, women do study more now, tertiary education than men, so that's good. But they keep on choosing field of studies that are less remunerated in the labor market, and there is also less employment. In the middle, we see that there is more of a balance. This is not because of the lack of skills or because women don't like that, don't have the skills to study those fields of studies. In STEM, for example, when we measure the 15 years old and we have 80 countries there, we can see that in some countries, women are better than men in mathematics. In others, the opposite. We see on the right side, we see on the upper level is the boys are better in those particular countries. And in the left side is the opposite. The difference is not very big. The OECD average is 8 points, which is not a lot. So they are very similar. We do see differences at the upper levels. In level 6 of PISA, which is the highest one, we see men being more excellency in boys than in girls. But also we see boys that are actually worse in maths than girls at the lower end. There is more dropouts in a school from boys than from girls, for example. But this picture is very different when you assess reading, in which in all countries women or girls are much better than boys, for example. And in science, they are very similar. However, even though girls are good at maths, are good at science, they choose fields of studies that are not related to either science or maths. And there is a consequence. And we see that in PIAC when we look at the skills of the tertiary students, university students very often, but sometimes also the vocational education students at the highest levels. And what we see is that in that case, men actually are taking over when we look at the math skills, numeracy skills. Women don't choose careers that have maths in it, therefore their skills levels go down, you use it or lose it, and men take over and have better skills. Why is so important? Maths. Math is very important because in PIAC what we saw is that is the skill that is highly associated with higher employment and higher salaries. So therefore, when we look at the salaries and the numeracy skills, what we see, and we see the PIAC has 5 levels. Level 1 is the lowest one, and level 5 the highest one. Women are in orange and men are in blue. What we see here is that the lower your math skills, the lower your salary. Is the same with employment and opportunities. And the higher your skills, the higher is your likelihood of being in employment and having a higher salary. But we also see here, and this is very important for this event, that same level of skills, women earn less. So you have the same level of maths, which is very important for everyone, but women earn less. So that's an important message also for this meeting. And also important message for women is that when we see in salaries that when women have tertiary students, tertiary education, they earn more in general. When they don't have it, their salaries are very, very low compared to men. Men, there is a problem with boys drop out, but they actually do not so bad in the labor market afterwards. The salaries are not so low as women. So for women, studying is very important. Choosing careers that have mathematical skills in them is also very important. And I think with this, I can end, and we can start the panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Marta. Let me now call the other panelists to the stage, please. First, we have Sabina Mehmood. Sabina is the Executive Director of Strategic Initiatives and Growth at WorkView. And Sabrina, you will explain to us exactly what WorkView does and how you are working on the skills area. Then we have Cairo Eubanks. Cairo is a youth activist and CEO. She is the founder of Bringing the Globe, an edtech resource platform that creates online content and curriculum for parents and teens. So another expert on young people and skills. And then finally, we have Rita Tandeka Mbizi, Vice President of the Democratic Nursing Organization of South Africa, DENOSA, and National Chairperson of the COSATU Gender Committee. Welcome. Now let's get started on the discussion. I'm going to move around a little bit so I can see all of you. Let's start with you, Sabrina. WorkView works a lot on skills of young people. You have a good overview of what the market needs, what their supplies are. Tell us a little bit more about your work with respect to the skills that women specifically need. What are you seeing evolving in terms of trends?
Absolutely, thank you, and thank you for including me in the conversation around action, which I think is so critical in weeks like this, rather than talking the talk, walking the walk, so thank you. So like you said, I sit as the Executive Director of WorkView, which focuses on skills development in the transition towards more technological roles. This demand is not new, right? I'll echo what you've already said, is this looming future of work has been looming for quite some time. We've already talked about the need for more upskilling, reskilling in more technology-based roles. What has changed is the speed of which all of this is occurring, right? In recent months, years, is the nature of what we are seeing in terms of education, for example, even in developed markets or in higher education. In the 4 years it will take either a man or a woman to earn an engineering degree. What has the nature of engineering become, right, in that such a short window of time? How are we remaining agile in that? What continues to remain the largest challenge is occupational segregation, right? Women hold different types of roles than men, as you've just heard. And the good news in that we're still talking about the same themes and the kind of the repetitive nature is we're all focused on the right things. The action we need to focus on quite a bit more. So with WorkView, we are focusing specifically on the intersection of 3 components: skills valuation, pay equity, and labor market intelligence. What we've seen in terms of the trajectory of nature of jobs, not only towards technology like AI and automation, is also a significant shift in sector. What we're seeing in terms of a shift in job availability in manufacturing, for example, engineering and labor-based roles is significantly changed given the political environment right now. Tariffs, manufacturing changes, kind of military defenses going up throughout the world. So that's where we see the exacerbation of occupational segregation, right? These were already highly dominated male fields. So the intersection of these 3 things we find the most critical. Skills valuation, which I'm sure we'll get to, focuses on understanding not only the soft and hard skills that are required for these types of roles, but also how to advocate for your own skills and equal work of equal value. That lends itself to the conversation of fair pay and greater financial inclusion. And lastly, labor market intelligence, which historically has been opaque for employees themselves. Yeah. We host a Future of Work Council where we asked young professionals, do you know the phrase labor market intelligence? And it was silent in a group that's otherwise very vocal. No one wanted to say we don't really use that phrase. But these are the life decisions you need to make throughout your career, right? Where to live, where the movement of available work is, care economies, things like this. So really looking at these 3 components as critical in understanding the upskilling need, replacement of jobs, displacement of jobs, and where we'll be in the next 6 months, 6 years, 60 years.
Thank you so much. Cairo, let me jump in right with you. Are you seeing the same trends with the young people you work with? What do you recommend they should be doing? You do advocacy and mentoring, and I was just commenting with my colleague, seeing it's always the same story about the tech skills and ICT, and you know, but most of us in here probably don't have an engineering degree either, and I am sad to say I wasn't able to convince my daughter to do math and science either. So how do we actually advance on this, and do we really need to, all of us, or is there also, can we work in these industries actually with different profiles? Tell us a little bit about your experience as an activist.
Absolutely. Can everyone hear me, first of all? Everyone hear me? Okay, thank you so much for that question. So in the capacity that I've had as a youth activist, I've worked with local communities on the grassroots level, connecting with companies as well as intergovernmental agencies and organizations. What I've realized is that we need to realize and recognize that, how do I put this? That we can't just talk about, empowering young people and the importance of the skills that we have, right? So let me see. What I had initially wanted to talk about today was,
Talk about what you wanted, don't worry.
okay, all right, because that's actually
As long as
not
somehow
my,
about skills and training.
you know what, and as I was pausing and I was starting to think about what I would say in that moment, I realized I'm not in that sector, I'm not in that field, so I can't speak as an expert, right, in the same way that Sabina can, right? But what I can speak to is simply the fact that the barriers that are facing women and girls don't just disappear when we enter the workforce, they multiply. So let's start with a hard truth today. If I were to have a child today, my great-great-great-grandchild will retire before the gender pay gap closes. We're going to hear a little bit more from speakers about the micro and macro level gender pay gap statistics, but here's the bottom line. It exists and it persists. These barriers don't just stem from self-doubt or personal limitations. They are deeply systemic. By age 15, girls who are being dissuaded by society, families, teachers, and those around them from pursuing certain career interests in male-dominated fields, internalize stereotypes about their abilities, leading them to opt out of high-paying jobs in fields like STEM and finance, or even entrepreneurship. And those barriers only compound. So I'll speak from an entrepreneur standpoint moving forward. By adulthood, unpaid care work drains 15 hours a week from women's careers, and by retirement, women face a 30% pension gap. As an American, I can speak to US statistics, but we know these disparities are global. And here's the reality. Women-owned businesses make up nearly 40% of all US businesses, yet generate only 5.8% of total national firm revenue. Women earn 59% of college degrees, but hold just 11% of Fortune 500 CEO positions. And only 28.6% of women-owned employer firms generate $1 million or more in revenue, a stark contrast to male-owned businesses. So what we really need, just to wrap up and to tie into what you're saying, so even though I'm not from the tech sector, I can't speak to some of these fields that you were talking about. What I can speak to is no matter what field you're in, right, how we can connect it all is making sure that we all have real access. So that's access to network, to funding, to contracts, and leadership opportunities that truly reflect our skills and contributions. Because let's be honest, if women are supporting women, that is important and desperately needed, and I'm glad to see the support that we have in the room today. However, if we connect with approximately half of the world, we are leaving 50% of the opportunity to achieve this objective of eliminating gender inequities untapped. But here's the good news, it's not too late. We're going to hear from the rest of the speakers in terms of solutions, and I'll also be sharing a solution as well. But to really close, Monica, it's important to recognize that even if we aren't in the math and science field, or let's say, for example, we did not pursue that, like you couldn't get your daughter to, there's still ways in which we can connect what we're doing and making sure that we're getting access. That's an important word to use, access to networks, to contracts, and to possibilities.
Yeah, well, that reflects very much what some of the female entrepreneurs and startuppers say. You know, they go and try to pitch their ideas, and somebody asks them to bring the coffee, and that's still happening. It's really shocking. I remember that your colleague Sarah, who is a very accomplished entrepreneur, she told me that that was happening, and it was impossible for her to actually get heard with a great idea of developing her own enterprise. So thanks for pointing that out, Cairo. Now, Rita, we know one area, we know for sure we're going to need lots more workers is the whole care economy. And this extends to everywhere around the world. All countries in the world are aging. We need more people in long-term care, and we also need more people in childcare, precisely to enable access that women can work and have families. And so you, as a trade unionist in South Africa, tell us about your work and tell us about this important sector, and particularly the situation of women in your important sector.
Thank you very much, Monica, and good morning to all of you. Ladies and gentlemen, the sobering truth is that the gender norms are still detecting the occupational segregation, forcing women into low-paying jobs in sectors such as health care, as we are saying, retail, hospitality, and agriculture. Many women find themselves concentrated in the informal economy, driven by societal stereotypes, where some occupations are still labeled as men's jobs and women's jobs. But the burden of unpaid care work often prevents women from fully participating in the labor market, pushing them into a low-wage or part-time jobs. The long hours required in a higher-paying occupation can be hindered by this unpaid care work. For many women, or millions of women, informal employment, Monica, is often the only arrangement that offers them flexibility and autonomy to balance the work with their family responsibility. Moreover, the changes we face extend beyond the workplace as women. Many women are encountering greater obstacles in adult education, primarily due to the burden of unpaid care work. While participating in the education may appear, as we have seen, equal, ladies and gentlemen, the reality is that the responsibilities that we shoulder often hinder our ability to pursue further learning and development. This, comrades, calls for us to improve the family support systems in our country and intensify our effort so that we ensure equal opportunities across the women in all sectors. As COSATU, we are also participating in the ILO, ensuring that we ratify the ILO conventions in our country. We are pushing the resolutions on decent work and care economy. That underscores the urgent need to address the gender pay gap. And this, comrades, is not just the statistics that we are displaying, what they were displaying this morning. But what they were displaying this morning is that it reflects the systemic barriers that women are facing daily. Sisters, to redress the occupational segregation, we need broad measures that challenges the societal views on women's role in the society and the support that women get in the society so that they are able to access the higher paying fields. COSATU has now acknowledged that AI and technological advancement has both positive and negative impact in the learning field. The problem that we might be having, that if AI enhances, I believe, the learning and efficiency in health and education, but we are not certain of the content that we are receiving from AI and as well as the other technological advancement. I think this revolution, comrades, needs us to be able to balance the risk of having AI and the advantages of having AI, because a lot of information is shared through AI. It then enhances the informal learning of our people. The evolution of social behavior due to the internet and the social media also has led a historical shift in communication and and has from communication from the oral to printed media. Monica, people now are communicating worldwide, globally, through social media. I am speaking to someone that I have never seen and sharing information. That could be the advantage, especially for our kids, but it can also be a disadvantage, as we have heard this morning, that as we are here, we don't know what is happening in our houses. As we are sleeping, we don't know what is the information that is shared with your child. In the morning, we will find another child, not the child that we have grown. COSATU has also have what we call campaigns that calls for increased public service in public investment in care, so that we support the effective labor force participation of women. We have structured our collective bargaining in such a way that each and every collective bargaining agreement has an issue of gender equality. And that collective bargaining should be biased. If you read all our collective bargaining in South Africa, you'll find that it either talk to maternity leave, paternity leave. It also calls 2 hours of work, as well as. Let me conclude, Comrade Monica. It is important for trade unions also to implement the monitoring and leadership capacity building program. The oppression that women get in their union is equal to the oppression that you see outside, the patriarchy in the trade union. It's rare to find a general secretary of a female in the trade unions. We are either deputies nor national treasurers. You will remain fundraisers than making decisions. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Rita. That was a very wide, you mentioned lots of issues, but I think your last point on women not being, it's again what Cairo said, women are not at the table when decisions are made. And women being trade unionists, trade union leaders is very, very important in order to get your message across and be there. We have very little time because we spend a lot of time networking, but I quickly just want to ask Sabrina again. Rita mentioned AI. What role does that play in your work as you work with people?
Absolutely, thank you. So when we talk about, and great point that you made, Cairo, is that you don't have to be in a technology-based role to know that technology is influencing everything that we are doing and talking about today. When we think about artificial intelligence and automation, there are really 2 factors at influence here. One is the idea of job replacement. So artificial intelligence taking jobs away. Mm-hmm. My job can be now, I don't know if any of us have input into ChatGPT. I definitely have used it this morning alone, thinking through. So job displacement altogether. The second component is access to education and resources around how to use artificial intelligence to your advantage and change careers, perhaps, and move in that direction. So in terms of practicality, what organizations can do and what we can focus on, because like I said, I know the aim here is action-oriented processes, is thinking about skills frameworks and valuation as it pertains to those 2 things. What is the value of the work that I'm contributing, and greater transparency in how an organization assesses value of a role when we think about equal pay for work of equal value. That historically, there's probably some methodology behind the scene of every HR team of large organizations throughout the world that is not easily accessed by employees themselves, right? There's very opaque environment, and what do I need for this role? What are the line items on this job application, for example, that are at minimum requirement? This shift towards technology impacts both men and women, right, across all genders. But what we see is the greatest negative impact on that widening opportunity gap for women in this case. So the value of greater transparency in how to advocate and empower yourself as a woman, for example, in the workplace through transparency around skills, values, is critical. The last point, just because I know we are short on time, but the last point I will make on that in terms of empowerment is not only, we were told, when we think about applying the gender lens, we've been told you can't measure, you can't manage what you're not measuring. We've been told to make the business case. We told we need more data. All of this exists, right? We have that now. We have the proof points. Still, seemingly, it's not enough. So what can we do as women, as a collective, as allies in the gender equity space, is having that greater access to information for advocacy for oneself, empowering you to push back and say, I have these values. And what I will say is that although computers are quickly replacing a lot, they can never replace humans, or they haven't gotten there quite yet, thankfully. That the valuation of soft skills and thinking about what you bring to table as a human being is incredible, and being able to articulate that will see the greatest influence on this shift.
Yeah. Kyra, I see you nodding. Do you want to add something to that from your perspective?
Absolutely, Sabina. I was thinking the same thing. I was like, wait a second, can AI think the same way that a human can? And the reality is that they will try, but they cannot replace the way in which we think, not just now in the present, but also in the future, being able to predict trends based off of what's going on around us. So yes, I agree. We have to think about the transferable skills and the soft skills that actually are marketable in terms of being able to negotiate, in terms of being able to communicate, in terms of conflict resolution, right? We need a human being to be able to do that. And so if I have just one more moment, or we're going to go.
Very, very quick, because I know that Manuela is already in the starting blocks for her second panel. But we do have time to network afterwards still, so I think a lot of conversations we started here, won't be able to finish everything, but I hope that many of you can stick around a little bit longer so that we can still talk. So
One thing I did want to say is that multiple studies show that businesses with at least 15% of women in senior leadership report 50% higher profits than those fewer than 10%. Sheryl Sandberg had actually shared this in a recent article published in the Financial Times. So if we want stronger businesses and we want stronger economies, we have to be intentional about unleashing women's full potential. I came here representing my business, Kyra Speaks, Kyra Writes, where we provide back office support, marketing, and operations strategic consulting. We work with businesses and organizations to help them grow. One challenge I have for you is to support women-owned businesses. You can talk to me, you can talk to many of the other people who are here, either representing an organization or a business, but find ways to connect and empower directly and make sure that that is financial, not just with words. Thank you.
okay, thank you. Rita, any closing words? Just very, very quickly, because yours will be the final word.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, women of culture, to address the pay equity, it's important that we align our policies, our national policies, with the feminist economy. That's the only way that we can make women receive equal pay for equal jobs, for equal value. This is not just a matter of fairness. Feminist economy is a fundamental right. I thank you.
Thank you so much. That was a great closing word. Let me just point to Marta and all of our resources. Everything she showed is available on internet, and she's of course also available to answer more of your questions. Thank you so much, and I will hand over now to Manuela Pozzan for the next panel.
So hi everyone. I would like to call the panelists. We actually have a very, very interesting panel with Monica. And you know Monica already, Head of Social Policy Division. We have Shia Wong, Postdoctoral Fellow at the Women and Public Program, Harvard Kennedy School. Thank you for joining. And Emily Dickens. Thank you for joining, Chief of Staff at Head of Government Affairs, SHRM. And we also have the pleasure to have with us Mrs. Irina Muzova, Deputy Director General on International Dimension of Justice Policies, Rule of Law, and Equality at the European Commission, DG Just. So welcome to the second panel. It's a pleasure to be here with you today after the first panel. And this panel, what we're going to do, what I want you to do is really to deep dive into the how. Sabina ended by saying we have the knowledge, we have the research, the evidence, we have quite a lot, but yet we're not there. So what can we do and what's next? And so I would like to start with Monica. And the first question is that we have seen how the gender pay gap accumulates over time. So we have the gender pay gap, the pension gap. And so my question to you is, what is the research saying, and what is proven to be effective?
Great, thank you for that question. So spoiler, we are going to publish our new edition of Pensions at a Glance at the OECD in December, and that will have a special chapter on the gender pension gap and the determinants. So you'll see a lot of detail on what I'm going to say very briefly. The gender pension gap is still about a quarter, 25% across countries, OECD on average. And of course, it's quite logical. We know it comes from three different things. First, we have the pay gap. We've just talked about that a little bit. We know that women make less than men for many different reasons. We have then the second point is the working hours. Women work fewer hours than men. And the third reason is shorter careers. Now, obviously, when we talk about pension reform, and you've heard this in many countries, of course, when they discuss this, there's always this idea that somehow pensions should be addressing these issues. And pension reform is often discussed in countries where you say, this is unfair for women, this is unfair for women, but then how can we really, what can we do in practical terms, like you said? First of all, obviously, no pension reform, no pension system can account for everything that went wrong over the life cycle. Okay, so first we need to be careful across the entire life cycle that these three factors are addressed: bad pay, fewer working hours, shorter careers. Now, what does that mean? It means that, for example, young women need to understand that taking a lot of time out of their career or working time is going to affect their pensions. It's, when you're 25 or 30, you don't want to think about that, right? Nobody wants to think about their pension. It's painful. Some people there was a survey saying, thinking about your retirement finances is more painful than going to the dentist. But we need young women to start thinking about it and just think the consequences through. That's one point. Then we really need to be careful also about retirement ages. Some OECD countries still have a lower retirement age for women than for men. That sounds like a nice thing to do for women, right? You have a nicer, longer retirement, and then you can take care of your grandchildren and of your aging parents. That's what we all want, right? So no, it's a really bad idea, because every year that you retire earlier than men means you have fewer pension entitlements. So, but this is not easy, and we consult with governments all the time. It's not easy to explain that to people. Third point, pension systems really do have an impact. So how you design pension systems is going to affect the gender pension gap. What women need more, women benefit more from survivors' pensions, and some Nordic countries have now individualized. They've stopped paying survivor pensions because they say women and men are the same in the labor market. Well, guess what? It's not working very well. We still need survivors' pensions because many women will be in poverty if they don't have that. Other point is redistribution through public pension systems. That will help women a lot because they have fewer private pensions, fewer enterprise occupational pensions. And so that's another point. And the last point is, and this is a very technical one, but it'll be my last one, mortality tables that life insurance companies use. If they are sex specific, it's going to be to the detriment of women because women live longer. So you would retire already with a smaller capital than the men because you retire earlier and you've worked less, and then you live longer on this capital. So it's going to be even less money for you. And so that is an important point. And for example, in the European Union, it's not allowed to have sex discrimination in these life tables for pension systems. And so these are just a few concrete ideas I'm going to leave you with.
Thank you very much, Monica. This was very practical. And but building on the life course, I wanted to hear more from Shia and her research on the fact that women have different career trajectories. And so when does the gap emerges, and what drives the gap?
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for that question. So I think it has been echoed a lot by the previous panelists that we know that education matters a great deal. Even though we talk about the gender wage gap in the context of jobs and pay, it already happens before anyone enters the job market, right? And so there's a study of ours that shows that even within STEM fields, qualified men and women, they have different levels of confidence. And that confidence, holding their GPA credentials constant, will actually lead them to different fields within STEMs that pay differently. So I think this point has been emphasized over and over again. But that, confidence level, even within the same job, within the same fields, within STEM, can lead people to have a very different first job in their careers. And those first jobs really matter because it sets the stage for their future career trajectories and pay. And what we find also another key moment is when people are getting their jobs, they're negotiating their offers from employers. But even before negotiation happens, the offers that men and women receive from the same employer, from the same job, differs. So we find that after controlling for all of the observable differences, we still find a 5% gap between men and women. And this gap can be perpetuated in their starting salaries if negotiation doesn't happen. But we know that negotiation plays a huge deal in the gender wage gap, and that usually compounds this initial difference we see in offer stage, and which actually has very actionable insights too, because it means that employers themselves are actually giving out uneven offers to similarly qualified men and women, perhaps because they value them differently, or that employers know that men have better outside offers. So in order to, attract the men, they have to make a little bit, offer a little bit more. And so all those moments get perpetuated throughout one's career. And of course, there are other moments in a woman's career. That's when the children come into the picture, right, when they become mothers. And we know that there's the motherhood penalty that goes with the fatherhood premium. So parental status actually has this uneven effect on men and women. It can really shed light differently on how we view men and women in the workforce. Finally, there is, the promotion. When people get promoted, we know that women are less likely to get promoted, regardless of their parental status, but because of either unconscious bias or, a lack of female mentors, and finally, because of just very persistent cultural beliefs about what men and women ought to be doing or good at. And so, like you said, thank you for the question. It's not just one single moment in one's career, but all of those moments compounding and added together that drive the gender wage gap.
Thank you very much, Shia, for highlighting some extremely important aspects. And I would like, you also mentioned unconscious biases. So I would like to move to Emily from the perspective of the private sector. The private sector has been implementing lots of workplace policies and practices. But certainly the Human Resources Department is extremely important in addressing biases and ensuring transparencies. Can you tell us more about the views of the private sector on this?
Sure, thank you. For those who don't know, SHRM is the largest trade and membership association for HR professionals in the world. 340,000 members, 165 countries. And so our members are HR professionals. Our members are also CEOs like you, who may have 20 to 25, 30 employees, and you are the person doing people management. So our biggest partners in this work, how many of you are people managers? When is the last time you did a pay audit on your own without HR? So people managers, we are part of the problem. Every time I hire someone, it is important that I look over my spreadsheet for my last hires to make sure I'm not creating an inequity in my team based on the new hire. And if that new hire does deserve the amount that I'm thinking about, and if it will cause an inequity, my job is to figure out how I change that so that my people who've been loyal to me for 3 or 4 or 5 years aren't penalized because of that loyalty. And so then my job as the people manager is to then partner with HR and say, I have a gap. How can we close this gap? Next step is to talk to that employee who would possibly be impacted. They have no idea what I'm going to hire the next person for. But I can go to them, so that's transparency. So the pay audit, and then transparently tell my staff, I've noticed there is going to be a gap in pay based on some new hires. I may not have the budget right now to get you to the number I want to get you to, but we're going to stair step this. And so this year I'll do X, next year I'll do X, and by then I should be able, through merit and or bonus, get you where you need to be. That is a practical example of what we can be doing as individuals in the workplace to make sure we are closing some of these gaps. And guess what? When you do it for all, so no matter whether it's a man or a woman, you're ensuring across the board that your team, everyone is getting paid what they should get paid and not being penalized. You know, we talk about the maternity penalty. There's a loyalty penalty. Women tend to be very loyal to people who take care of them, and you're there and you're hiring someone off the street who is coming in and the market has changed since you've been there. It is the responsibility not just of HR, and I will say this again, it's not just HR's role to do this. When you take on the role of people manager, you must ask these questions. You must look at your budget and make sure that you've got some dollars set aside each year in case you need to make some equity adjustments. You are part of the solution. The next thing we're seeing in the States, pay transparency laws. But there are 2 questions, and again, you have to share this in your interviews when you're interviewing people. Culture and compensation. Compensation is not just the base pay. It is all the other things the organization provides. So if you're an organization that maybe you're paying 50% of market on base pay, but you have open leave. For someone that's a mother or a caregiver, the ability to make good base pay at 50% of market, but be able to take leave, and it's not frowned upon because it's the culture of the organization, is important. So pay transparency, culture transparency, pay audits, and also people managers being in partnership with HR can really help us address some of these issues.
Thank you so much. This was kind of new. And so moving to the representative from the European Commission, Mrs. Irina Muzova. Now, the European Union has enacted several directives during the past years, in particular the Work and Life Directive and the Wage Transparency Directive. And certainly, they are changing some of the perspectives and advancing gender equality at work. Is this really happening?
Thank you very much, Emanuela, for having me, and also for the previous speakers, because somehow, so I do not have a full reply for the concerns that you have mentioned and also all the challenges, because Monica has already mentioned that, yes, in the European Union, in a way, so we have already in place several instruments which are addressing these challenges, but let's face it, even in the European Union, which looks to be a very good address for women to live, so it will take us 60 years at least to reach complete gender equality, while it has been for more than 70 years enshrined in the founding treaties. But yes, we are looking into the instruments. So you asked me, Emanuela, about a recent legislative tools that we have imposed. Let's start with the work-life balance. Indeed, we are trying through the legislative instrument to change the culture and the perception of the 2 genders in the work market. How? Because we have introduced the 10 days paid paternity leave, but also 4 months parental leave, out of them 2 months fully remunerated and also non-transferable, and also for the first time ever the 5 days of the annual care leave. So with that instrument, which is now have been already transposed by the member states, and we are looking into the ways of how it has been implemented. So we try to shift the understanding in the labor market that it's only the woman who is taking the maternity leave, who is taking the parental leave, and eventually who cares about the elderly. And that's why, so with this shift of the understanding, and also because the rights are already in there, so we want to make understand that the genders are important. They are, of course, very important roles to play according to the family decision, but at the same time, so it doesn't mean that the role of the two different sexes in the labor market will differ so much. And we have seen already a growing uptake of those rights in the several member states. Of course, the uptake is different according to the traditions, but also the remuneration, because it is also very important. But we see it is working, and we will be analyzing very soon. Now, the second norm, which is still under the transposition, which is the pay transparency, is also a little bit addressing the issues that you've been speaking about. Because yes, you go to the negotiation, but you don't know so what the remuneration is about. And the pay transparency directive is actually obliging the employers to put clearly on the table. So this is the remuneration for this position. And also, it will not allow to actually ask for the pay history of the incumbent. Because this is where also the women, they feel penalized, because when they are not so maybe eager negotiator, and also the pay history can bring already this kind of the different leverage when negotiating for the final remuneration. So this is maybe one leg of this directive, and the second is, again, so you mentioned the pay audits. So this is exactly where we go. Gradually, because it will be in place from 2026 and for the different size of the companies, but we will reach until the companies of 150 employees, where they will not only be obliged to do the audits, but they will have to be obliged to publish, and also to publish not only for the specific jobs, but also for the jobs of equal value. Which means that we will have a very strong empowerment, very strong tool in the place, which will allow to have a horizontal understanding. So what is the remuneration at the center company for the equal job or job of equal value? And it will, of course, we believe, will change the, I would say, the culture, the company's culture. Because with that, of course, the company is providing for the equal remuneration for the jobs of equal value will also be those having a certain advantage in the labor market. And you know that, at least in the European Union, so we have a strong shortage of the labor market. We are looking for the talents. So those companies, so having this in the place and being, let's say, performing well, so they could be those companies also retaining the talents and making sure that they can best profit it from the talent pool, which is very limited and shrinking.
Thank you very much. And perhaps I start from you with a second round of questions, because to me what would be very interesting to know is what's next.
What is the next? Well, of course, I believe in the strong voice of the data. So, of course, as a regulator, so you put a legislation into place, but you need to first to understand so how it works. Of course, so we start with a modulation before going to any legislative regulation, but then you need to look into the impact. So we need to evaluate and see whether there is any need for the fine-tuning, and of course, so we need to work very closely with the member states, but also with the partners, social partners, in order to see how best we can improve the implementation of these legislations. So this is, I would say, the first thing. Second thing, I was speaking very much about the culture, change of the culture. I was speaking already about the change of the culture of the companies, of the business sector. We are doing the same with the public sector, because it's a very important leg. But I think we need to look into the change of the culture of the whole societies. And here, I'm afraid, so this is not so easy to regulate, because we are fighting the stereotypes which are deeply rooted in our societies. From this, we need to not only look into the legislative change, but the way how to acknowledge that what we are looking for, the parity, the equal remuneration, but also the equal rights. And that's something which brings profit, which makes the society better. The business case is there also. I think that in the previous panel, so we heard that those companies which are, let's say, benefiting from more diverse and more equal leadership, but also they are benefiting from better profit. But this is really very difficult and steady to get. We are engaging in awareness, so we have been proposing several campaigns, so looking into the breaking this vicious cycle of the stereotypes, because you have been also speaking about difficulties to get women into the STEM education and STEM businesses. I'm afraid, Monica, that neither I was so successful with my two daughters. But this is a long process. We have bright women, bright girls there. We have to inspire them. Artificial intelligence is maybe also one of the ways, because it's completely changing the world of the work. And while engaging the youth into embracing this change and looking for the opportunities and facing the risk in the more proactive way and changing this vicious circle in order to change also this stereotypical approach, I think this is the way how we can progress together.
Thank you very much. But I also think that we're pushing so much women into STEM, and if women don't like those occupations, why aren't we professionalizing and valuing the occupations where women want to be? Because sometimes, I mean, we're really pushing women to do what they don't want to do or they don't like to do, perhaps. So, you know, I think we need to have the narrative that also looks at what women want rather than what the economy only wants. But certainly, I would like to know now just one more point from Shia and Emily, the same question. From your experience and from the private sector and the research, the academia, what in your views really works? What is the best action to take?
So honestly, we've got to look at this as a partnership. To me, that's what really works. You said something that I love about choice. We have a lot of choice in our careers. What bothers me a lot when we do these discussions is there's always a focus on the number of women in Fortune 500 companies. So what? There are far more small and mid-sized companies in this world that make more of a difference in lives every day. And there are far more women leading in those organizations than we know and think. And we don't share that data. We have our children and our young women thinking, if I don't get a job at this brand, I'm not successful. Yet, I'm 4 or 5 levels down from the CEO at this brand. And my cousin, who works over at a brand I've never heard of, reports directly to the CEO. And if you check the 990, because it happens to be a 501, you'll see that the cousin is making 6 figures. Cousin has quasi stock because it's a 501. Cousin has a bonus. So we need to widen our perspective on what success looks like. And I love that you said that. It is not just in STEM. It is not just in Fortune 500s. It is across the spectrum where you can find success. And that takes you investing in the research and learning more and not just being caught up in the brand. So it's a partnership. We're over-dependent in, I can speak for the US, as Congress has been unable to do their job. Business has stepped in to try to take care of people. And they've offered a lot of support for employees. But what it's done is it's weakened our ability of choice, to leverage our choice. If you've got the skills and the interest to do something different, you don't have to stay where you are. You can invest in your own upskilling and reskilling. And ladies, we all have that purse we paid over $500 for instead of taking that $500 course that could change our lives. The third thing I would say is, let's not fear AI. So some of you will say, AI is going to take my job. In our organization, we implored everyone to use AI over the holiday break, get to know it. You're not going to lose your job to AI. You're going to lose your job to a human who knows how to use AI. So that's my last piece there.
Thank you. Shia, your final word?
Yes, a lot of the interventions have been mentioned. I think those are the structural interventions like the transparency laws, salary history bans, but all of these interventions can also have unintended consequences. These are very nuanced, so even if someone cannot disclose or cannot ask past salary, men have been shown to be more likely to disclose their past pay. And so there is still places where information can come into place. And given the availability of data, we also know that there are so many platforms out there that share compensation information that empowers individuals to use that information to negotiate better, right? And then also in terms of parental leaves, I think has been studied extensively in the literature. Flexible working arrangement, remote work, is intended to help women to also advance, without those barriers in terms of childcare, elder care. But women are reluctant to take them because it could mean that they are seen as less committed to their work, right? When they're working from home, their boss will think that they're actually taking care of their kids instead of working. So I think these structural changes, while they're good, sometimes could have mixed results. And I think what's really promising, what's really hard, but more promising is actually the non-material aspects of work, and that is our cultural beliefs around what men and women can do, and also reshaping the role of work in our lives. And so this is making me think about the Nobel laureate, Claudia Golden's work from last year, when she's talking about the greedy work. What kind of job pays the most? It's the job that works, long hours, inflexible hours, and it's usually the men who do those jobs. And so I think the pandemic has really forced us to rethink what is the role of work in our lives. How do we fit work in our lives to enrich our lives rather than become enslaved as cogs in the capitalistic machine, and to work just endlessly, and then that actually perpetuates the gender wage gap. So this is, I think the panel is really reminiscent of also the John Maynard Keynes 1930 essay about the economic possibilities for our grandchildren. At the time of writing the essay, he actually predicted that by now we should all be, working 15-hour weeks, and various inequalities won't exist because of technologies and the more productive society. We're not there yet. We're far from it. But I think that sentiment is still relevant now. How do we think about work and the distribution of equal opportunities? It's not just so that the women in our generation can do better, but also it's for our children and grandchildren. What kind of legacy do we want to pass on? So I'm actually here today with my 6-year-old daughter, and I want to, not end on a pessimistic note, but something that, it's takes all of us to really reshape not just how we do things, but our beliefs and the culture around what the meaning of work is, and what kind of work is possible for men and women, rather than just thinking that there's only one type of work that pays the most and everyone should do perform that kind of work.
Thank you so much. Thank you all. I think we have unpacked quite a lot. I have heard new things, so I'm quite satisfied with this panel. Thank you so much. And I'll leave the floor to Jemima Njuki, who is the Chief Economic Empowerment at UN Women, for the closing remarks.
Good morning, everyone. Who else is looking forward to the 15-hour week? Because I am. We really hoped that we would have some time for engagement, because I know there's also a lot of ideas bubbling in our heads now. But unfortunately, time is not on our side. But one of the things that I've really, really loved about this morning is the fact that we've heard about what the challenge is, what the barriers are, but also really practical solutions that are working and that we can take away with us. I want to preface my closing remarks with two things that I've really taken away from this: that we have to redefine our idea of success and really listen to women as well in terms of where they want to be, that the career trajectory does not have to be one. The second thing that I really take away from this, and then I'll read for you the formal takeaways, is this idea of a catch-all mindset, you know, that some of the material things are easy to work around, but this will not change until we have a catch-all mindset in the way we think about work, and that for so many years, we've been trying to fit work into our lives. Actually, we've been trying to fit life into our work. And what we really need to be doing is fitting work into our lives. Yeah? Excellent. Okay, so the first thing, my first takeaway from this is the urgency of what we need to do. We are here celebrating 30 years since women and men met in 1995 in Beijing. These issues, such as the gender pay gap, we cannot afford to wait another 30 years. We've heard from the panels today, solutions exist. We need now to come together, form the partnerships that scale these solutions so that we can have impact on women and girls. The idea that we need to tackle this from a life cycle perspective, that there's not just one point where this gender pay gap gets defined, that we need a holistic approach, and this is vital because we are not just tackling the issue at one single point. It is when women are they're young women getting their skills, it's when they're entering the workforce, it's when they're building their careers, it is at retirement and what happens after retirement. So really important that we take this life cycle approach. This means that we have to invest in education and training that supports women's career advancement in the workplace. The second other takeaway is that we really have some robust policy frameworks, and we've heard from the EU on what they're doing. We have frameworks that are targeting the gender pay gap. We have frameworks that are targeting pay transparency. We've heard about data collection and use. And so we really must go beyond just the awareness that the gender pay gap exists and take an evidence-based action. And so we must continue to prioritize quality gender statistics, sex disaggregated data, and other relevant knowledge so that we can measure, understand, and address the gender pay gap. Lastly, we recognize the need for ongoing dialogue and the sharing of best practices across sectors. Even just from sitting here for that 1.5 hours, I have learned so much, so many practical solutions that even us who are not HR practitioners, as long as we are people managers, that we can actually take. And so achieving gender equality in pay is a responsibility for all of us, for governments, for employers, for workers' organizations, even academia in helping us understand trends and analysis, and civil society organizations. So we need to work together across sectors, across industries, so that we can address these issues in an effective and sustainable way. I will end with a call to say, this is why we formed the Equal Pay International Coalition, so that we can continue to advance this agenda together. I welcome you again to join us by becoming a part of EPIC. We welcome all stakeholders, member states, international organizations, civil society, academia, the private sector, workers' organizations, because this is an agenda that we want. By the time we close the SDGs in 2030, we want equal pay for work of equal value to be top of the achievements we have by 2030. So I want to close by extending my gratitude to the Rockefeller Foundation for giving us this excellent space to convene this morning. Thank our panelists for generously sharing your perspectives, your ideas, your data, and the practical work that, that you're doing. I want to thank you, our audience, again, with apologies that we couldn't come to you, as I know you also had a lot to share, and thank those who've been following us online. Together, I know we can make a real difference in eliminating the gender pay gap, and I will restate that we cannot wait another 10 years. So the time for action is now. We know some of the things that work. Let's commit to doing them together. Thank you. She's gone.